system that we live in is programmed to make us dislike ourselves, and if you dislike yourself, how can you do anything effectively and feel good about what you're doing? So
Mic hat. Rolling in 3, 2. Ladies and gentlemen, straight to the point, straight to the streets. We down here in Northeast DC, Union Market to be exact. And this is a little different from what we normally do. Today, we're focused on the candidates running for Ward City Council at large. And so we want to kind of get an opportunity for them to speak to y'all. And with that being said, we have a very special guest. Who do we have a pleasure of speaking with today?
Greg Jackson, DC Council at large candidate, Democrat.
Greg, we appreciate you for giving your time, and because time is precious, we're not going to waste yours. Now, before we get into it, Greg, tell the people a little bit about who you are. How did you even get into politics?
Yeah, well, look, I'm a Ward 8 homeowner, business owner, entrepreneur. But the way I got into politics was in April 2013. When I was walking home, I got caught in the middle of a crossfire of a shooting, and a bullet hit me and hit 2 arteries, nearly cost me my life. And I'll never forget, getting to the hospital and being interrogated before I went into surgery, and realizing that, as a black man in the city, I'm seen as a suspect first and a person second. And I decided in that moment that I wanted to do more to make sure that other folks didn't go through what I went through. I spent 2 years in the mayor's office working on community relations and helped address a lot of different issues in communities most impacted by violence and violent crime. Moved on to push for laws in Congress and got the first bill passed on gun violence in 30 years, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act in 2022, and then was hired by President Biden to be his advisor and report directly to him and Vice President Harris on all things gun violence prevention, where I received a $17 billion budget, moved $42 billion into violence prevention, 54 executive actions, completely implemented that law, and ultimately reduced homicides by 49%, which was huge. We tripled the historic reductions of any other time in history, and that was amazing. But the real big challenge was DC is still struggling with public safety, and so decided that in this season of my life I will come back and focus on my neighborhood and my district and my community to make sure that this is the safest place possible, as well as address the other root causes that lead to some of the challenges we're facing.
Now, you kind of touched on our next question, the next area we want to get into, which is public safety. Now, we've spoken with a lot of community residents and community advocates and a lot of youth and youth advocates. And one thing they expressed is that some of the youth, even though they're being blamed for the crime, they don't feel safe themselves.
Yeah.
If and when elected at City Council, at-large member City Council, what is your plan and how do you plan on approaching re-establishing the connection between the youth and the community and making sure that they feel just as safe as all the other members of Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, well, the way they feel is real. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for youth, especially black youth, and it's been that way since probably about almost 2 decades now. But it's not the same for every major city, and other cities have figured out how to keep their youth safe. We just haven't done what we need to do in DC. If elected, I would, one, make sure we're investing in education and recreation, so just at least the foundation is covered. Right now, the current council has been cutting our education and recreation, and I think that's a very dangerous direction to go. We also have to make sure that we invest in safe spaces for our youth, whether that's late night recreation, specific programming, but we have to make sure that our kids are safe. And I'm really frustrated with the curfew because, frankly, it's pushing our youth back into their neighborhoods, but that's assuming that they're safe there, and unfortunately they're not. We have to make sure that our youth are safe no matter where they are, whether it's Navy Yard, National Harbor, or Marshall Heights, that they should have safe spaces wherever they are at every turn. We also have to make sure that we're thinking about why violence is happening. There's only one gun store in DC, but yet we have youth that are bringing guns to fun recreational spaces, and that shows a real breakdown in how we're thinking about law enforcement. We are not intercepting firearms that are getting into our district, and we're not thinking about the source of how guns are getting to the hands of our kids. And it's a shame that right now, it's easier to get a gun in your hand than to get fresh groceries. And I think that's a breakdown in how we address crime in the city. We got to look upstream and not just cracking down on our youth, but how do we make sure we're protecting our vulnerable youth from having access to dangerous weapons. So that's where I would start. One other cool thing I want to focus on is what I'm calling a Youth Safety Fund, which will be led by Youth Network for Safety. And basically it's a fund that will be provided to our youth to advise and for them to create their own ways to keep themselves safe, whether it's a streaming university or a concert. But let's get creative and not pretend like adults have all the answers. We know that our youth understand what's happening way better than we do. Let's empower them to lead the change and not just observe the change.
Do you foresee in the future, if and when elected, reestablishing the school board to really focus on the school as an independent environment? Or do you have another alternative into how you would address the school system and the school culture in DC?
I think the real problem is not the bureaucracy or the governing structure, it's the community engagement and community involvement. And we also know that the best way to determine a child's performance in school is how involved their parents are. And so what I would like to focus on is not another level of government bureaucracy, but why don't we invest more into our schools to strengthen parent-teacher engagement? Same way we have a librarian in every school, and now we have security officers in almost every school. We should have a parent-teacher engagement officer or service position for every single school. And I think that's something that will drastically improve how well our students perform, but also how more families can be engaged in the education process. And I think that's huge. We also have to make sure we're investing in our public schools. We know that our traditional DCPS schools, that we have a big problem with teacher turnover, frankly, because we're not providing enough benefits for our teachers. And we also know that even in our public charter schools, our facilities are a mess. And we have to invest more in maintaining the facilities. And so we're kind of missing the mark in both sides of our public school system. And I know that's a huge priority for me. That's why I've been endorsed by every single education organization that is endorsing in this campaign or this actual race. Every single one has endorsed me and endorsed my campaign because they believe in my education priorities, but most importantly, my plan to invest in our youth, both education and recreation.
A lot of the singers said that they dreaded their life at this stage because they just feel ignored.
Yeah.
If and when elected, how do you envision reincorporating the singers into the community so that they feel a part of the community and that they don't feel that they're being ignored?
Yeah, look, I think first things first, this is something I actually am really passionate about. I'm actually getting my master's in public health at Yale University, and we did a whole session on the aging crisis. And believe it or not, across the country, people are getting older, which is a great thing, right? But we also have less folks having children. And what we've learned is that most of our cities don't have a strong strategy for this shift in demographic. We have so many older residents. And I think DC's no different. Our Office of Aging is underfunded, and I think the strategy in place is very short-sighted. And so I want to help us revamp that and think about how do we serve our elder voters and residents and neighbors, not assuming they're going to be gone by 70, but they're going to make it to 90 and 100, because that's where the trend is going, and it's something we should celebrate but also prepare for. To be concrete, one specific thing I want to focus on is how do we make sure that our elders are housed and that those who are homeowners, that we provide grants for them to repair their homes, that we look at tax relief for our elders who want to keep their homes but maybe are struggling to maintain it. And then lastly, we have to invest in estate planning to make sure that our seniors and our elders can pass down those homes to their family. We know we have a cost of living crisis in this district, but we also know that the cheapest home is one that a family owns. And so many of our seniors have the keys to generational wealth, but also to a lower cost of living for our neighbors. And so I really want to focus on how do we keep our older homeowners supported, prepared, and in a good place to transition that, to keep that wealth going from generation to generation.
Now, sticking with something you said in terms of cost of living, that seems to be one of the biggest issues that people brought up. We did an episode right here about cost of living. A lot of people shared their concerns and thoughts about, about them struggling, whether it's the predatory ticket enforcement things that they mentioned, or whether it's the extremely high rent in DC.
Yeah.
If and when elected, how do you envision your plan to contribute to reducing and relieving the pressure that some of these residents feel financially in DC?
Well, look, one of my top 3 priorities is affordability. And not just because it's a buzzword, but DC specifically has a big problem. If we were a state, we would be ranked 49th in affordability. which means we would just be only more affordable than Hawaii. And I love DC, but I don't think we should be competing with the beaches of Hawaii as far as affordability goes. And so we have a big problem. And I think we can focus, one, on cost of living. My approach is to make sure that we're building more housing supply, but also that we're creating more pathways for folks to own in this district. We have to think about how do we strengthen and support a middle class of actual neighbors who can own homes and stay here for generations. We can't just tell people they can rent or leave, because right now, too many of our folks are leaving. So I think we start with cost of living, whether that's supply, financing, or preserving for our elders. We also can look at how do we create more pipelines for job opportunities. The biggest challenge I see with our affordability is we also have the highest unemployment of any other major city. So not only is it unaffordable, so many of us do not have job opportunities. So we have to make sure we're investing in small businesses, creating more jobs so we can be more competitive in the workplace, and matching that with pipelines for workforce training and preparing folks for the next generation. I also think that there's also opportunity for the government to help with affordability of everyday costs. And it's not just your groceries, but it's also, the cost of your utilities, which we know is a huge strain. So we have to invest more into solar, and into different environmental friendly programs that can help reduce the burden of your utilities. We also can do more around public transit to make it more reliable and more affordable for our residents. And while, look, we cannot quite offset the big tariffs of what's happening in the White House, there's a lot in our control day to day. The one big thing you mentioned too is parking tickets and speeding tickets. We have looked at that as a revenue source as a council, and I'm not in council yet, but I really think that parking and speeding tickets should be used as a safety measure, not a revenue measure. In the last 3 years, we've seen that the revenue of tickets double. And that's something that's being celebrated in the Wilson building. And I think that's a tragedy. We should not be treating our residents like cash cows. We need to think about how do we shift behavior so folks drive slower and safer, so folks don't get harmed. But the goal should not be how do we raise $500 million off of tickets. I think the last year we got $347 million off of these tickets. One speed camera brought in $9.2 million by itself. And so for me, that shows a big red flag on, one, speeding and driving behavior, but two, why are we doing this to our own residents that we want to keep here, that we want to celebrate, that we want to support to have a quality life? And so I want to shift that culture, and I think the way that we build revenue is not by attacking our businesses or attacking our drivers or attacking our residents and taxing them more, but more how do we create and invest more into generating revenue through investing in businesses, attracting tourism, doing things that excite our economy and stimulate our economy, not just trying to squeeze every dollar out of every resident that's brave enough to live here.
Now, Greg, you have a very unique tool set in terms of candidates. You have experience in the mayor's office and in the Biden administration.
Yep.
Talk to us a little bit about how do you think that has prepared you for this leadership position right here as an at-large council member?
Yeah, well, look, my job in the mayor's office, I worked as director of constituent relations. So my job was doing small things very well: trash pickup, snow removal, filling potholes, making sure that we pave alleys, that we repair sidewalks. All the small things that are so important to your day-to-day and to you and your neighborhood. That's what I had a master class in my first 2 years in DC government, and I did that a decade ago. Since then, I actually get my policy chops in Congress, and I talk about the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, but this was the first bill on gun violence in 30 years, and we were able to get 15 Republicans to be a part of this. I mean, this created the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It put $2 billion into mental health. It strengthened law enforcement across the country. It protected domestic abusers from buying firearms. It expanded our background checks. I mean, this was one of the most transformational bills ever created in history, and I was a part of that process, and not just a part, leading it as far as designing it, writing it, and then ultimately advocating for and securing literally Republicans that are willing to fight for a gun control bill. And then my job in the White House, I think, really prepared me in a different way. When I got there, President Biden didn't say like, hey, this is your little office. He said, no, you're in charge of America. And I was responsible for every tragedy that struck any community nationwide. And I was equipped with a $17 billion budget, over 100 staff. And basically I was also equipped with managing different agencies and ensuring that they are executing the vision of the president. I organized multiple meetings in the Roosevelt Room. multiple meetings with Biden right to the next to me, and oversaw 12 government agencies at the federal level to make sure they're doing things to help make our community safer, whether it's promoting new job programs, providing more mental health supports, or even making sure that law enforcement strategies were stronger. And so the scale that I just came off of in the White House, I think is much wider than any other candidate in this race, and maybe across a couple other races too. But our budget is $22 billion. I've already managed $17 billion by myself, and I think that makes me especially equipped to help us get through this very tough economic times for DC.
Now,
last thing, sorry.
Go ahead.
I also testified before Congress 4 times. And so we think about 7 times total, but 4 times last year. And we think about defending DC from Trump and federal overreach. I have the most experience by far and the deepest understanding of what tools we have, what levers we have to protect ourselves. And I also have the most relationships in Congress that can be those allies that fight alongside us. In fact, 3 members of Congress have already endorsed our campaign. That list will continue to grow, and I think that's what you want. You want a council that has relationships in Congress, that partners in Congress, not just shows up and has a press conference when something bad happens. And unfortunately, that's how our council has moved, as a separate entity that's just thinking about DC, but not recognizing that at the end of the day, Congress has to approve our budget, and if we don't partner with them, they can meddle with our rights, with our laws, and with everything that we know that we call dear.
now let me ask, we talk with a lot of people who they seem to be turned off by the term politicians and politicians in general.
Yeah.
In your mind, you have a lot of time invested in the community and serving the community. What do you see as the difference, if any, between a politician and a community servant, and which one do you consider yourself?
Definitely consider myself a community servant, but I think that you shouldn't be afraid of the word politics, because a wise person told me one day, if you don't do politics, politics will do you. And that's what we've experienced, especially over the last year, where we didn't think it was important to pay attention to what's happening in the White House, and Trump took our MPD, right? We didn't think it was going to impact us, but now we got National Guard marching through. We didn't think the ICE and immigration approach mattered to our communities, but now they're raiding in our neighborhoods, right? And so we cannot be afraid of politics. We got to lean in and build power, or else we will consistently be a victim. And what really frustrates me is, for a long time, DC has kind of been like sitting ducks, man. Like, we have not had the political power to defend ourselves, let alone fight for more. And when we think about protecting home rule and protecting our budget, we need strong political power. And also, when we think about achieving statehood, I think this is the right time to get it. I mean, Virginia just changed their lines to add more seats. Maryland just changed them. Tennessee did it in the opposite direction. There's a national war right now, politically, to make sure that we have more representation in Congress, and DC should be a part of that conversation. We should be able to clarify with folks that, hey, if you make DC a state, that means you have 2 folks in the Senate, 2 more in the House, and this is the right time to bring that to the table and get buy-in nationwide. But that's the power of politics. We can't look at it as a game and as something to avoid. We need to look at it as part of how we thrive and ultimately grow and expand what we want to see happen in this district. There's no reason why DC is struggling with the budget when we literally have trillions of dollars in the U.S. Treasury right in our city limits, right, in our district limits. And I think what that shows is that we don't have the relationships or the political power, even before Trump, to take advantage of what's right in our backyard.
Now, as we close out,
Yeah.
June 16th, people are going to go to the polls. Greg, why should people rank you as their first choice for at-large city council member?
Yeah, look, I think there's a few reasons. One, I have the experience, not just politically, but the lived experience of being a survivor of gun violence in this district, of being a homeowner in this district, of being someone who's been here 20 years. I didn't grow up here, but I've been here my full adult life. And I think that experience is extremely valuable. I think we're at a time where we especially need someone who understands how to navigate the federal government, because that is one of our biggest threats, and we just don't have enough folks in council that think that way. I also think public safety is a major issue and a major concern in all 8 wards right now. And I'm literally one of the leading experts on public safety in the nation. And so we don't have that in council. We don't have anyone who actually has done this professionally before they were elected. And so I can be that voice and that addition to council. And then lastly, I feel like this is a time where the stakes are extremely high. We have the highest unemployment. We have economy that's struggling, public safety, housing crisis, education crisis. This is the time to put the best people in the game. You know, we all have our favorite player when we think about basketball and sports, but when it comes down to the fourth quarter and the game-winning shot is on the line, you need to put your best players in the game, not the ones you like, not the ones that got the coolest sneakers, not the ones you know or grew up with, but who are the best players to put in the game. And I think when you look at my background and what I've accomplished so far, I'm an obvious answer for who is best in this moment in history. And so I hope you'll consider ranking me number one, because this is a time when we cannot afford to not have our best folks fighting for us. The district is unfortunately too fragile right now. And home rule, our budget, statehood, and all of the resources for our youth, for our safety, for our housing are all at stake. And so it's important we put our best foot forward.
I love the confidence. Y'all heard it here from Greg. Put the best player in the game.
Come on, man.
Greg, we appreciate you for giving us your time today. Before we go, anything you want to share with the people? Any last words?
No, I want to just thank everybody. You know, we've had over 1,400 people donate to this campaign already, which is, you know, historic in its own right. You know, we've had so many volunteers now, hundreds of volunteers that have helped make this happen. And so I'm just so thankful, man, to be a part of a movement. And also just to have the opportunity to be able to serve. You know, if elected, this will be the first time in history we have an at-large member that lives in Ward 8. And so I don't take that lightly. I'm just very excited just to have an opportunity to help us shift the power structure in a way that can serve folks who I think have been forgotten for too long. And so for all those who already support me, I really appreciate you. And yeah, let's talk more action. Vote Greg Jackson.
Straight to the point, straight to the streets. We out.